Safi Perkins is the Senior Program Officer in the Quality Assurance Unit Office of the Board for Undergraduate Studies at the University of the West Indies Mona campus and Fellow, UE Ethics Center Initiative. She is the former Dean of the Studies of the St. Michael's Theological College and a member of an adjoining faculty for the Institute of Black Catholic Studies, Xavier University, Louisiana. She holds degrees from the University of the West Indies Mona, Cambridge University, and the Boston College. She has an eclectic interest in faith and political life, sex, gender, popular culture, and Christianity. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite Dr. Perkins at this time.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening.
I appreciate the invitation to be here with you to share some thoughts. Unlike Stephen, if I don't work from a script, I will probably go way over time. So let's see what I can do in my 15 or so minutes. All right. Some of you might know Joanne Richards Goff of Crew 44. Crew 44. Now, Crew is an acronym for Culturally Relevant Expressions of Worship, and it aims, and I'm quoting here, at creating vibrantly authentic worshiping communities across Jamaica, the Caribbean, and the world, acknowledging all of who God is with all of who we are. And the 44 is chapter 40, verse 4, referencing Isaiah chapter 40, verse 4, every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill be made low, and the rough ground shall become level, rugged places a plain. Now, Joanne put out her first album a couple of years ago. It was entitled Come Make We Worship. And my favorite song on that album, I have a favorite song, and I'm not going to tell you what it's called. What I'm going to do is, if you give me a second, I'm just going to play a little piece of it for you. I want to play it. Can you hear it? Don't have that much time, but it's a lovely piece and I actually quite enjoy it. It gets me to move. Any of you have any thoughts as to what that piece might be called? All right, good. Might be called Master God, but obviously you're seeing the connection as to why I would think that it would be appropriate to start off my little presentation with that piece. I'll take another suggestion as to what it might be called. Any ideas? You see, can you translate from the Jamaican into the Jamaican English and pick up what it could possibly be called?
Master God?
No, because she said Master God Demaili. So she's using her Jamaican. She intersperses it if you're to listen to it later on with some English. But not to waste your time, it's actually called Psalms 23. Psalms 23. Because what she's done is that she has rewritten the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, we all know that one, in the Jamaican language, using Jamaican music, Jamaican ideas, Jamaican concepts, using the heart language of the Jamaican people. So I find in that song the inspiration to talk with you very briefly about God in our own voice. So notice that in a way, you'll find that I'm building on Stephen and I'm building on Adrian. And I like Stephen's attempt at nuancing you, because part of what we have to learn how to do is that kind of nuancing. Yeah? So like you guys here in this Caribbean theology class, Joanne uses the term Master God to refer to God or to ultimate reality, which we human beings experience in a very personal way. The use of Master God harkens to our history of enslavement and colonialism, where the sin of idolatry was rampant among people of European descent. These Europeans believed, and perhaps many of them still believe, if you look at what's happening in the world today, that only they were created in the image and likeness of God. They set themselves as gods over so-called lesser people and lesser races, particularly our African ancestors, and they exploited them for economic gain, destroying the lives of generations in the process. And I believe that we're still trying to come to terms, centuries after, with this long experience of suffering, this abomination that was based on what I consider to be a form of idolatry. So Massa was God, and he indeed was very godlike, because he retained the power of life and death over black bodies. So if I were to paraphrase the Hebrew man who encountered Moses, or who Moses encountered in the book of Exodus, who set you as a God over us? It's a key question for us to ask those who choose to oppress us. Now at the same time, Master God also calls us to a recognition that the God we have received is indeed Master's God. You heard that from Adrian, you heard that from Stephen in different ways. In whose image and likeness we are not created, or by whom we have been created to be hewers of wood and drawers of water. As such, we continue as Caribbean people to struggle with the images of God that we have. I'm suggesting to you that the image of God that many of us as Caribbean people have is of a stern, vain, thin-skinned, vengeful, elderly white man that is sitting in judgment over his creatures. So note, white, male, elderly. So a further question remains for us, a question that's very similar to the one that Robert Ehud asked when he called his very provocative book, Must God Remain Greek? Afro-Cultures and God Talk. We should ask, must God remain white? And I could say male, elderly, you could continue. Now, I find that our answer here in Jamaica and in the Caribbean is not as unambiguous as one would expect. It's not a clear no, it's not a clear yes. This again, Stephen, is part of this nuancing. Yeah? As we continue to struggle with the word images we create when we speak of divinity, as well as the actual images that we draw, that we consume, that we pass on. A couple years back, we had an ethics seminar next door over St. Michael's. I think I probably wasn't dean at that time, but we invited Dr. Dennis Howard to be part of a conversation with us around dancehall. And I remember Dennis's presentation. It was very discomforting, but he launched a very searing critique of the images of Jesus that are to be found in many Jamaican homes. Many of the so-called conscious Rasta or reggae artists actually bun Jesus. You know that, right? You've heard it. You've heard them use it. They bun Jesus. And they don't bun Jesus because they don't believe in Jesus, but they bun Jesus because they reject the European Jesus that has been foisted on us during slavery and who continues to shape our sense of value as African-descended people. It is no wonder they affirm the divinity of a non-European man and the divinity of a black man. This consciousness should enter into our reflection as we struggle to affirm who may stand up and who may stand in as a public representation of the divine, particularly as we're involved in worship. So that leaves us with a question as Jamaican theologians, as we seek to give expression to our faith in divinity in our own voice, giving expression to our experiences, our history. Should we continue to refer to God as Master God? Are we not reinforcing the idea of a God who is male, who is white, who is dominant? Where is there room for our faith in a liberating God? The same God, the resisting God that we heard Stephen mention to us, was very much a part of how we encountered and accepted the God that was presented to us, recognizing that we also came, our ancestors also came, with their understanding of divinity. I believe that we should examine further our local ways of referring to God as these have implications for how we live and be. How is Papa Jesus Jesus? Remember Athanasius' proclamation, and I'm quoting here, what has not been assumed has not been redeemed. So can we really and truly talk about black bodies having been saved? Can black female bodies be saved? I'd like us to think about and to reflect on that. Now, in addition, if I go back to Joanne's rendition of the 23rd Psalm, I realize that when we speak of Master God, remind me, as she does, what comes to my mind as a Jamaican woman, as theologian, attempting to reflect on divinity in my own context, out of my own experience, I recognize that it brings immediately to my mind this very contentious question of male-female relationships in Jamaica. Rosalina, you might have to give me a time signal here. I have 4 pages and they're tight, so give me a time signal and I'll summarize as I go along. So it brings to my mind the contentious question of male-female relationships in Jamaica. Now the man is expected to be provider, protector, so he's the one who is doing the minding, or we don't really sound the deal, we say, you know, the minding, the man will mind me. And then the woman expects to be mine, right? Now look around, think about all the stories, and they have been numerous and voluminous stories over the last several months, several years in our newspapers and on our news media. What happens when one is provider and one is providee, where one is subordinate and the other is superordinate, if you want to use those terms? What you find is that somebody is going to end up dead. Reasonable? Someone is going to end up dead because someone has ownership over the body and resources of the other. So we have to ask ourselves some questions about the readings of Scripture that continue to support these opposed and opposing roles of men and women, who we know are created in the divine image. So how can we speak about Master God in our own voice? And one of the things I'm interested in is popular culture in its various forms. And I recently did a survey of street art in Jamaica. Just looking around sort of urban street art, what was there, and what I found was that I saw numerous Rastafari related images. You know, I saw lots of His Imperial Majesty, I saw the Lion of Judah, I saw the Rastaites and colors, I saw lots of Jamaican colors and symbols as well, on wall carts, on stalls, on shops, and fences, on buses. You've seen them too, right? Yeah? So I'm hoping that my thoughts about them might make you look at them sort of differently. Now, one of the unexpected but recurring representations of Rastafari that I found was of the divine duo, King Omega, King Alpha and Queen Omega, you know, the Emperor Haile Selassie and his royal consort, Her Royal Highness, Empress Menem Asfa, okay? And I can give you many examples. If I was giving a full presentation, I'd give you some images. And you know, Alpha and Omega are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet and so on. So there's some stuff I could tell you about that. Now, the drawing that I found of the royal couple capture their likeness in what are widely available photographs in the public domain. So there's no question about who it is that is being represented in these portraits that I saw so many of as I was doing my survey. So unquestionable, the images of the emperor are especially popular, and he's very easy to recognize. His features are very distinctive. He has this prominent beard and so on. And we know, of course, that Selassie continues to have this iconic status, and he's very well recognized globally. The queen, of course, the empress, is not so well recognized, but she's certainly revered among Rastafari women who find her presence alongside the emperor a way of talking about how Rastafari men and women should be relating to each other. So the presence of this female image, and they don't always quite look the same. So sometimes I found, there's one image that I've seen where the artist actually wrote beside it, Empress, as if to say, don't make no mistake who this I'm drawing, Empress, eh? And when you see the couple together, from time to time, they're accompanied by other Jamaican notables. So you might see them beside Marcus Garvey, or I've seen them with Norman Manley. I've seen them with multiple images of the Lion of Judah and so on. I think I did see one with Obama. Now, they're always very resplendent in regal robes and very elaborate crowns and headdresses. Eh? I noticed that when the emperor appears by himself, he can be in his military garb, but whenever he's with the empress, he's always in full regalia. interesting for me. Now, what I've come to realize by doing my research and trying to make sense of what it is that I was seeing presented to me, because I couldn't remember in the past seeing these images. There's something that has started to come into my consciousness of recent time. I know I've always seen Rasta imagery, but I can't ever say that I've seen both the emperor and the empress together. I don't think you have either. It's something that's much more recent for me that I've seen them come together. So, interestingly, the portraits of the king and the queen together represent the Godhead, which for Rastafari, interestingly, is both male and female. In the Rasta Godhead, both male and female principles are present. And you see this being talked about by, for example, Leonard Howard. He was the first person to preach the divinity of Selassie, and he writes about it in his book called The Promised Key. It's a very foundational Rasta text. So recognition and acceptance of the presence of the feminine in the fullness of Rastafari Godhead, I recognize has developed over time, and so it's not often acknowledged, especially as Jah has been given such a central and preeminent role as God incarnate, the Black Messiah. Now the fullness of the Godhead is present in King Alpha himself, so notice he can be by himself as the fullness of the Godhead. But the Empress does not, the fullness of the Godhead does not reside in the Empress. So she really is never alone. She has to be with the Emperor in order for the fullness of the Godhead to be present. But I did find one image down on Friendship Lane in Crossroads. If you're heading towards Halfway Tree, on the left-hand side, Friendship Lane is going down near the KFC. And I saw some stalls and stuff. And there's one image there that I called the Empress Inflamed. She by herself, she's in her crown, there seem to be flames around her, but the Emperor is not there. And I've not seen any other image like that. I mean, I've only seen a limited number, of course. I haven't seen everything that exists of our street and folk art. But what was interesting was I found beside her INRI. So that she was there, and then those words, that acronym, that holy sacred acronym was there. You know what that means. Jesus Christ, King of the Jews. It was put on the cross as the reason for his crucifixion. But the Rastas had taken that, right? And for them, INRI means I, Negus, rule Israel. So it's actually a way of speaking about the emperor and his messianic role and his divine presence and so on. So my interpretation of that particular image is that the fullness of the Godhead is present with the INRI because the emperor is there in those words, yeah? So where am I going with this? This is part of the discourse that I want to present to you about how in our Jamaican/Caribbean space we have attempted to present divinity in our own voice. And I'm giving you images that capture that. It's not just simply in the words of our theologians, because part of what I'm challenging here is that what Rasta is doing, which we have not yet recognized, is that Rasta is implicitly critiquing the Christian Godhead, which has no feminine principle in it. And that for me is fascinating. Wrapping up, Rosalina, give me 2 more minutes. Where am I going with this? So they're critiquing traditional churches because we don't have this complementary presence in our Godhead, which is in some way wholly male or male and neuter, depending on how you want to read the dove. And we can go back to all the discussions about Ruah being feminine and, all of them things. But the point of it is, there's an implied critique that's going on. Now, it doesn't mean that Rasta is a perfect space. For me, it's surprising that this is present in a faith perspective that is often seen to be patriarchal and that subordinates women. But then you also recognize that there are the kind of ambivalence is also at play in Christianity itself, because Christianity speaks of and believes in a resurrection of the body, but it doesn't mean that we really are truly loving and valuing of the human body in certain respects and so on. What am I going to end? Let me end by reading for you, just as how Joanne Richard Goff did a reworking, a translation of Psalm 23. in the Jamaican language and use words and so on that are deeply meaningful to us in our Jamaican context. Erna Broadwell did a rewriting or a retelling of a classic fairy tale, yeah? And she renamed it Sleeping's Beauty and Prince Charming, yeah? Sleeping's Beauty and Prince Charming. And this is the closing line of her story. She says, and Prince Charming left Sleeping's Beauty to be a woman alone. And that is why black people have to wait another 400 years before King Alpha and Queen Omega will appear to settle them in their kingdom in the promised land. For Sleeping's Beauty is still only half awake, drugged in its woman's pain, and she cannot properly put body and soul together, for that needs the help of Charming. Rastafari, me not choose me. And I leave it there for us to continue our conversation. Thank you. I think I know